Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. This is the Front Row Network podcast, the podcast for all things pop culture for NPR Illinois Community Voices. I'm your host today, Craig. You usually are used to hearing me on Beyond the Mouse, but today I get to talk Batman with someone extremely special. And joining me first, we have the host of Front Row Classics, Brandon Davis. How are you, sir?
Holy podcast, Craig. This was a fun interview coming up.
It was so much fun. And then we really couldn't speak to this gentleman without inviting Gus Gordon on because, and I want you to just take a moment and explain to the audience, Gus, because you're kind of a special co-host with us here today, your relationship to Batman 66 and to our guest, Burt Ward.
Well, thank you, Craig, for having me. And what a wonderful birthday present this was. So thank you for that. I was born in 1965. So I was 1 year old when the Batman series came on ABC in 66. And my parents would push my crib right in front of the television set. And I loved the color, the excitement. But my first words were not mama or dada. They were honest to God. And my mom will back me up on this. So will my dad, Batman. And that just set it in place. And you know, you can talk about Michael Keaton, you can talk about Val Kilmer, you can talk about Ben Affleck and Christian Bale's. Adam West was my Batman, and Burt Ward is iconic. When you think about it, when you think of Robin, Burt Ward is the only name that comes up, at least in my mind. And two great guys. I've met them both over the years at different cavalcade of customs car shows. And I was one of those grinning idiots getting my picture taken with them. I have a great picture with both of them looking off in one direction to the next fan in line. And there I am staring at the camera like I've just gotten the keys to the candy store. So I really appreciate being here. They've been an important part of my life, and I love having the chance to meet one of my idols.
Absolutely. You know, and we did just have the opportunity to speak to Burt, and you're going to hear that here momentarily. But if anybody was a grinning idiot during that particular interview, it was this guy over here, because I was just so impressed. And it's such a great interview. He talked so much about his love for not only the character of Robin and how that came to be, but also discussing his relationship to Adam and just so many insights. I really want to just get right into this interview. So any final thoughts before we do, Brandon?
Just he is a oasis of information. So there's a lot of information coming your way, but it's all fun. So enjoy.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll do a na Burt Ward. Here we go. It is such an honor to welcome to the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices podcast, Burt Ward. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm fine, citizen.
Wonderful. That is so great. I get to ask you the first question. And actually, it's something I don't know if you are aware of. I know that you have a relationship with Kevin Smith and with Ralph Garman, but they are actually going through right now on their podcast, Hollywood Babylon, and doing commentary tracks to the entire 66 Batman series. I didn't know if you were aware of that. And,
no, I'm not. I adore both of them. And when I got my star in Hollywood Boulevard, Kevin was so gracious and came and one of the people that introduced me and spoke on my behalf. And Ralph, I've done interviews and stuff with him. He's a terrific guy. Both of them. I've been on their show years ago that was actually live from the LA Convention Center during a Comic-Con.
That's fantastic. And so that's all I just wanted to make you aware of that, because it's such a great listen to hear Ralph's information. He's encyclopedic about this show, and then Kevin's commentary on it as well. But if you had any thoughts or words about people that might be revisiting the series through them, if you wanted to share anything with that.
Well, both of them really are pretty knowledgeable about the series. Of course, unless you were actually there, you wouldn't have seen and done and all of the kind of things that Adam and I went through, and the experiences and the fun and the pain and literally and the explosions and the bat gas and the tortured every single week and managing to survive. But they've got a pretty good handle on it, and they work great together. So I think that's going to be a fantastic commentary. I'm definitely going to be tuning in when that's available.
Absolutely. It's ongoing right now. I think they're about halfway through the second season. And so it's on Hollywood Babylon. They probably don't need me to promote them, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of that since that is going on now. But Brandon has our next question.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to sort of the origin of everything and just tell us about the audition process and how you landed the role of Robin. And did you audition with Adam West?
Yes, yes, and yes. So first of all, I started in show business at a young age. My father had what I would call an early work ethic. So at age 2, I became the world's youngest professional ice skater in my father's traveling ice show, which was called Rhapsody on Ice and was a predecessor to Ice Capades.
Wow.
And that was a tremendous experience. And later on, he after touring for years, I guess he got tired of that and sold the show and moved to Beverly Hills, California, became a very prominent real estate broker. And I grew up in a real estate family. And I actually got my real estate license 3 months after I turned 18. I actually was at the time the youngest real estate agent in the state, licensed in the state of California. But on the weekends, I would help my dad by what they call sitting on houses, not literally sitting on the house, but sitting in the house, where people would come in and you could hand them brochures, answer questions. And on one of those occasions, a very famous producer, Saul David, came into one of the houses, which he ultimately purchased. And we talked for a little bit, and I asked him kind of, I guess out of the blue, would he be willing to watch a scene that I did? And he said, okay. And I did a quick scene for him, just a few minutes. He said, I think you've got talent. I'd like to send you to an agent. I said, oh, that would be fabulous. Thank you so much. So he sent me to an agent. And when I went to see the agent, the first thing the agent said is, I can't get work for the actors I've got. I would never take a new actor. And only reason I'm taking you is because Saul David asked me to do it. I don't expect to work for a year. And if you did get a job, you might have one line or one word. So, boom. That was not terribly encouraging. So I left there kind of like with my head between my tails, so to speak. But it was a couple of maybe a week or two later that I actually got a call from someone in the office, maybe it was the secretary, who said, there's something going on at 20th Century Fox. So we made an appointment for you to go over tomorrow at 4:30, and you can drive up to the gate, and they gave me the address, and they'll give you a drive-on pass, and you can park and go meet this casting director. And I said, well, what is it about? He said, we don't know. It just came in. We just saw it. And, here's the interview. I said, okay. The next day I went there, and I was sent over to a bungalow where I met this casting director. And the casting director asked me a couple of questions, didn't tell me anything about what the role was, but said, would you like to meet the executive producer? Now, you need to understand, I had been studying acting professionally for years with a professional coach in Hollywood. And I was also at UCLA studying in their acting class. So I had been studying for years, but I'd never gone out on an interview. Okay. And I'd never done a role, actually, either one. So for me, this was a new process. So when he said to me, would you like to meet the executive producer? I said, sure. I figured everybody got to meet the executive producer. Well, that's not true, but I didn't know about it. So I went to another bungalow, and they said, the executive producer, William Dozier, will see you now. And I walked into the room, and maybe because I hadn't been rejected like so many actors. I mean, I'm telling you, I've seen these poor people. They're just, they're devastated because, their product is themselves. So when they get turned down for things, they're emotionally a wreck. But I wasn't emotionally a wreck because I'd never been turned down. So I just walked in and said, hello, sir. And I shook his hand like this, and he's like, oh my gosh, And he looked at me for a minute and said, you're kind of big for the part. I said, oh, but I promise you, sir, I won't grow anymore. But he laughed. I mean, how can you not grow if, So he asked me a couple of questions and said, would you be interested in, would you like to do a screen test? And I said, sure. Again, I figured everybody got to do a screen test, but that's not true either. So it was about a week or two later that I went to 20th Century Fox, back to the same studio, and I went onto stage, whichever stage it was, and they wanted someone who was athletic. And I was a brown belt in karate, and this is in 1965, which is interesting because karate only came to the United States in 1959, that's the first time it ever came to the United States. So most people never even heard about it. So, and I brought a friend so that I could do some falls, which is more like judo and stuff. And then I broke a board with my hand, and they said, "Oh, that's great." And then say, "Okay, now we want to have you do a scene with another actor." And they gave me a single page of dialogue, and all it said, they were paragraphs, and one paragraph said Bruce with some dialogue, another said Dick with some dialogue. They said, "You're going to play the part of Dick." There was nothing about Bruce Wayne or Dick Grayson. And to be honest with you, if they had put the name down, I wouldn't have recognized it, because where I grew up, there weren't Batman comic books, period. So I'd never heard of Batman. And I never even heard about it that day. So here I sit down, they introduced me. They said, "Here's this person you're gonna do this with, Adam West." And I sat down next to him. Within 5 minutes, the two of us were laughing, and we never stopped laughing for over 50 years. We instantly became friends. I think we both have a kooky sense of humor, but things that he said made me laugh, and things that I said made him laugh. And we just got along famously. So we did the Bruce and Dick, dialogue in front of the camera. And they said, "Okay, that's great." And I said, "Well, thank you very much. Nice to meet you all." And I start to leave. They said, "Whoa, wait a minute. We're not finished with you yet." And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We want you to go over the other side of the sound stage. There are 2 wardrobe men at a trailer, and they're going to help you get dressed." And I kind of paused for a minute. I said, "Well, no disrespect, but frankly, I'm fully capable of dressing myself." They said, No, you don't understand. You just go over there to that trailer, and you get there, and they'll help you get dressed." I said, all right. So I go over to the trailer, I go in, and sure enough, there's 2 wardrobe guys, and they have it's like a giant bed, must be 10 feet long or something, or was it more like a couch without a back? Anyway, had all the stuff on it. And I said, "Am I going to put some of this on?" They said, "No, you're going to put all of it on." I said, "What?" These 2 guys helped me get dressed. Most uncomfortable thing. That costume was so incredibly uncomfortable. There's nothing in my entire life that was so uncomfortable as wearing that costume. Every single thing bothered me. The boots were too tight. My mask rubbed my eyelashes, and that's very irritating when you make any movement and your eyelashes are being affected. Sure. And the red vest poked through my t-shirt, and the wool poking my chest. The cape was double thick bridal satin, and it was pulling my head back like this. It was so uncomfortable. Wow. And in any event, I was miserable. But I've always been the kind of person that tries to make the best of things. You know what I mean? So I'll never forget that after they got me dressed and on my way out, in which I'll tell you something, because of that mask, I could only see straight forward. I nearly broke my neck trying to find that step down from the trailer inside. But as I was leaving the door, I turned around and I said to these 2 guys, I said, the good news here is that after another 15 or 20 minutes, I'll never have to wear this costume again. They kind of laughed, and famous last words. Right. So that was the beginning. And I of course saw Adam in this costume, and I thought, what is this? Is this some kind of Shakespearean piece? I didn't know what it was. And then a couple of weeks later, I started getting a phone call from the studio. "What's your shoe size?" "Oh, 7.5. And then a few days later, "What's your hat size?" "Well, I don't wear a hat." "Well, go get your head measured." "Well, where do I go to get my head measured?" Go to a tailor. Yeah. I mean, all of these things that I just had never done, but I hadn't heard anything. And it was after about 6 weeks from the time I did that screen test that I got a call from these same agents that said, "We've decided that we're going to go ahead and sign you." And we said, "Oh, great. Now I'm going to be formally represented." So I drove to Century City to where the agents were located. And I sat down, and they had a big contract, big, thick contract. And I looked at it and I said, "Okay, and I started to read it. It said 20th Century Fox. I said, "Well, this must be the wrong agreement." And I thought I'm signing agency agreements. They said, No, you got the role." I said, "I did?" They said, "You mean the studio didn't tell you?" "No." And when I finally saw the people at the studio, they said, "You mean your agents didn't tell you?" Well, 4 of the 6 weeks that I was rotting, waiting for an answer, I had already gotten the role, but I didn't know about it. So to fully answer your question, the next time I saw the executive producer, William Dozier, he said, "Burt, we're glad to have you. And by the way, would you like to know why we selected you to play this role?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I would. I'd like to know." He said, "We interviewed more than 1,100 young guys across the country over a 1.5 year period. And he said, the reason we picked you is because, in our opinion, forgetting television, forget it. If there really was a Robin, I mean, like the real thing, we think you would be it. So we don't want you to quote act. We want you to be yourself, and we want you to be enthusiastic. Well, that's not very hard for me to do, right? I mean, that's like nothing, right? So, and that's what I did for 120 episodes. And I think you might find it curious and interesting that with the 120 episodes, which took 6 days a week to make, and 32 or 40 different directors over the course of those, 120 episodes, that not one director ever told me how to say a line, not one. Now they would say, like, you're in the Batmobile, you're in front of the Batcomputer, or this is a scene about this. But when it came to my dialogue, when it came to Adam's dialogue, neither of us were ever directed.
That's it's just wonderful to hear that, because obviously they've made the right choice in that you two fell into these roles so well, and it became such a juggernaut of a show. And actually, Gus's first question is a bit about that.
Sure. I wanted you to take us back to the mid-'60s. And were any of you prepared for what this show became, the phenomenon that took over, the Beatles, Batman, and Bond? Were you prepared for that?
It's interesting you should say that, because that's what Adam came on the set one day, said, Burt, there are the 3 Bs. What do you mean the 3 Bs? Beatles, Batman, and Bond. And I said, oh, Adam, and I think what made our show, partially what made our show such a success, beyond of course, the Batmobile and the fighting the villains and the climbing the walls and the humorous dialogue and the double meanings for the college kids and the hero worship for the kids, and all the villains and stuff. But there was a special relationship that Adam and I had, and we played off of each other. And, if you look back in history, the great comic duos had great contrast. I mean, Laurel and Hardy, right? Abbott and Costello, Johnny Carson, Ed McMahon. I mean, they had great contrast. So as debonair and big and broad as Adam liked to be, I mean, you just understand, he was exactly like he came across on television. In other words, he came to me one day and said, Burt, just dead serious. Burt, I really, really understand what it's like to play Batman now. I said, oh, Adam? He said, yeah, I watched Charlton Heston in the 10 Commandments the other night, receiving the word of God from the mountain, Sermon on the Mount. And I realized the tremendous importance and responsibility to the world. I said, oh my God, Adam, please. Oh God, well, don't, and so as big and broad as he was, I was just that fast and but he was just so funny. And naturally, to me, he was funnier than any comedian, because he had a style of humor that was always a double meaning. You never, ever knew what he really meant, although it could be or it couldn't be, and he would say things to people that were like numbing. For example, we'd be signing autographs in costume after the series, and some young ladies would come up and he'd say something. He says, my, you're very beautiful. And they, oh, well, thank you very much. He says, I'm beginning to feel strange stirrings in my utility belt. That's Adam. And he was so playful and such a great guy. And I just loved him. And on the weekends, even though we worked terrible hours together, our wives would let us get off to play some tennis, in the morning or something. We'd be playing tennis on a public court, and people would come on, and you see him looking and this, say, oh my gosh, that is Batman and Robin playing tennis. That kind of craziness. We had a great time.
Just so perfect. And you mentioned this a bit, but the timeless nature of this show as well, it was such a huge hit in the 60s. But what I love about the show now is that I can introduce the concept of superheroes to my 5-year-old through your show, because it is tamer than what you'll see. It allows for a more fun and jovial and even comedic look at these superheroes we know and love. Can you talk about how that experience, or why you think that this show is able to bridge those generational divides and is so timeless? It's it's such a great watch even today.
Right, because it really doesn't offend anybody. I mean, that's where problems come when something, offends a group of people or whatever. And you think about it, even though we had lots of action, I mean, amazing action, amazing color, and violence, it wasn't really violence. I mean, nobody ever really got hurt. I mean, you see somebody pick up a chair and break it over the head of a Batman or something. He slumped down and he's right back up again. I mean, nobody ever got hurt. There was no blood. It was bigger than life. And how can you not like something bigger than life? It is a fantasy for everybody. And for the actors that came on, Cesar Romero, Burgess Meredith, Frank Gorshin, Julie Newmar, Vincent Price, all of these great actors and actresses. This was the one time that they were unlimited into being as big and bad and broad as they wanted to be. And every one of them loved that freedom. That was, the freedom to laugh hysterically and be big and broad and have fun with it. Everybody loved it. And everybody on the crew got involved. I mean, for example, I'll never forget, it was the third season. And I was watching them film because I had a scene where we're going to break into the villain's hideout, and I'm watching them filming the precursor to that. And I noticed that the cameraman's got it at an angle. And I said, "What's the matter with your camera?" "Nothing's the matter, Burt." "Why are you filming these villains at an angle?" He says, "You mean you don't know?" "No, I don't know." "Why are you filming them at an angle?" "Because they're crooked." "Oh my, they're crooked. So therefore the camera should be crooked." I mean, everybody got in on the act. It was wonderful.
That's just so great. And I'll tell you, it's almost like you're reading our script of questions, because
Right.
The next question is going to be similar to that. But I will say, just an addendum to my question, the best part of watching this as a dad is that my son is starting to learn how to read. So I get to reenact and read out loud those words. So I get to go boom and pow, while this is going on. It's just the best. So, but Gus has a question about those guests.
Right. The show was such a phenomenon back in the mid 60s, and every celebrity wanted to make a hip cameo on the show. That must have really been fun to work with all those great stars. And did you have a favorite experience of one of the performers who came on the show?
That's a great question. But here's the thing. Think of it this way. I'm 20 years old, turning 21, and I'm like a kid in the candy store for the first time. Every one of these actors or actresses was somebody that I'd either seen on television or watched
Sure.
in movies. So I was awed by every one of them. And so it wasn't like, oh, I had a better time here, a better time there. I mean, just to be around them, even in between while they're lighting, to sit there, amongst them and hear the things they have to say. It was enriching. It was like phenomenal. And so many actors and actors wanted to be on Batman. And of course, there weren't enough villain roles. I mean, even by the third season, they tried to double up the villains. It was not near enough. That's when after the first season, they introduced the walking up the wall or climbing up the wall, where somebody would open the window. And first one was Sammy Davis Jr. I mean, later on, Jerry Lewis, Don Ho, Betty White, Colonel Klink. It was just so many people that everybody wanted to get it, and their kids. These actors would come on and say, if they had children, they're saying, "Oh, my kids are driving me nuts. I had to do this show. I had to do this. I never a moment's peace."
Yeah, and I really, what I want to do right now, though, you mentioned 4 of the ones I want to talk about, but there were some key villains throughout the 3 years of Batman, and I just want to get like a word association or just a favorite memory that you have of working with a certain one of these villains. And I'll start with Cesar Romero as the Joker.
Well, you want a one-word answer?
One, or story, memory, whatever you want to do.
Well, he was the consummate professional. I mean, he just had a dignity, just a natural. He just was a great human being. I don't know how else. He was just, it's kind of like you're in awe because somebody just has a presence that is just, classic and just always knew his line. Did everything perfect. He never made a mistake. That's these pros. They are so good. I mean, the director might want to change a little this but the fact is they were just dead on every time. And working with them was like, I mean, boom, it always worked.
Fantastic. Burgess Meredith is the Penguin.
A very intellectual man, very, very intellectual man. And of course, you know, he was great as the Penguin, and he was great in the Rocky movies. Yeah. A great actor, and he had a certain style. And it's so funny because he had to smoke. You know, he's got this long cigarette holder, and he had given up smoking years before, so he didn't really want to smoke. And so he went through this whole thing, and he did that coughing and clearing his throat. He was amazing to work with.
Frank Gorshin as the Riddler.
Rubber face. I mean, one of the nicest guys. After the series, he came over to my house, and my wife and I, and he and his agent, we all went out for dinner. Just a nice guy, scared to death of dogs, absolutely petrified. And of course, we operate the world's largest giant breed dog rescue with more than 50 dogs in our house. So, I mean, he had no peace, and these dogs would come up to him.
Oh, gosh.
This poor man, I'm telling you, he was whiter than the Joker. He finally calmed down enough that, you know, and I had some pictures taken with him, but you should have seen his eyes, you know.
Julie Newmar, Catwoman.
Highly unpredictable. This is a lady that is charming, is brilliant, immensely educated, immensely talented, but is the only person that I ever saw Adam actually look like he was a little worried about what she would say out when we're on the stage or something, you know, in front of a group of people. I mean, she has said some real winners, okay? And she has a way that she is streaming her consciousness as she's talking. That's why you don't know what she's going to say, because I don't think she knows what she's going to say. But she is wonderful and adorable, and I mean, a giant lady. I mean, the lady was 6'2" or 6'3", and then they put her in 4-inch heels. They made her 6'7". Adam was 6'3" or 6'4", and he had 3-inch heels, made him 6'7". Alan Napier, our butler, he was 6'9.5". You know what I mean? And with me, even though I'm 5'7.5", they cut the soles off my shoes to make me as small as possible. So it was kind of interesting for me when Adam and I would go out and make appearances. They said, "Gee, you're so much bigger than I thought you were," because they made me in proportion to be so much smaller.
Wow. Did it take adjusting when you would have to work with a different Catwoman? You know, you also had Lee Merriweather and Eartha Kitt. What were the two of them like to work with?
Very nice. Eartha Kitt was very professional, very, very serious lady. Leanne Merriweather is just a doll. I've seen her many times, and she played Catwoman in our Batman movie. And I've made appearances with her as with Julie. And they, in fact, even were Adam and I and Julie and you know, and Frank Gorshin and you know, Leanne. And I mean, we're all together in one of some of these, they have like a reunion type of thing. So, but they're very nice people, Wonderful. Very sincere, very down to earth, and great performers, really great performers.
Wonderful. Just a couple favorites left. One of my favorites, Vincent Price as Egghead.
Well, when he came on the set, I must tell you, I had seen The Raven, the movie he did when I was a child, and it had really scared me. So to be honest with you, when he first came on the set, there was that moment, you know, where I don't know if you got a butterfly in your stomach or you have a palpitation in your heart.
Yeah.
But he was very nice, and I just enjoyed working with him. He's just a really nice man, you know, a great and so good. I mean, these people are so good, and you can feel that presence when someone is really a good actor. I mean, you could just you know it.
And then I'll end with just one of Gus's favorites, David Wayne as the Mad Hatter.
Oh, David Wayne, yes, with his hat factory. He was just kind of a wild and crazy guy, but he was kind of to himself. So I didn't really have a chance to talk to him too much. But you know, he came on the set in character, and I think he left the set in character. That's the only thing I ever saw was that character.
That's so great to hear all these stories about the show. And this takes us a little bit outside the show a bit, but I wanted to get your opinion on something and see if you had been following along with it. In the last decade here, there's been kind of a major change to Batman in that Bill Finger has been added as a co-creator of Batman. And I know that we are better about trying to make sure that creative people get credit for what they have done. Bill was only involved in one episode of the show. I think he wrote one episode of the series, but I just didn't know if you had followed that and your thoughts about sort of the credit being given to appropriate parties and to particularly Bill Finger in this instance.
You know, I may have met him, but I don't recall. I do know it is important for every creative person who makes a contribution to be recognized for that contribution. I mean, this didn't start with Batman. It really started with Superman and the two original, I think, creators that I don't know, they each got $50 or $500 and then never saw another dime. Everybody who makes a contribution should be recognized. And so for that, I'm glad they recognized him. It didn't change anything for me, and through the years, besides Batman, the series I did, I've done several Batman specials. I did a CBS movie of the week, full length, the Misadventures of Adam and Burt. And then I had more recently 2 full-length animated features that this was the last work that Adam had done, a voiceover of Batman, voiceover for me as Robin on these 2 Batman features. The last feature, we had this incredible villain. I don't know if you saw that, but it played by William Shatner. Okay. And so, I mean, I mean, my gosh, you just imagine even thinking about it, the 2 most iconic television shows in history, like Batman and Star Trek, with the actors working together,
Yeah, it was just perfect. I really enjoyed those.
More recently, I did, I guess it was about a year ago, I had a guest appearance on Supergirl on their, they had this Crisis on Infinite Earths, that their 5 different TV series were all kind of involved with fighting this crisis on Infinite Earths. And I had my shot was just before the opening titles, it was a great fun thing. And then even more recently, DC Comics came out with their, they'd done one on Batman, they'd done one on Superman, but this last 6 months, they came out with Robin, 80 Years of the Boy Wonder, a incredible, beautiful coffee table book. It had, oh my gosh, hundreds of pages from the comic books, beautifully reprinted. And I did effectively the introduction to the book. And they said, would you be willing to write something? I ended up writing, I think it was 6 type pages became 4 pages in their book. And they loved it. They didn't change anything.
That's
Can you get that on Amazon?
Yeah, it's available all over, bookstores. It's a major, book from DC Comics.
I see a Father's Day present idea.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I mean, and it's just like there's so much material there. I mean, if you really sat down to read it, it'd probably take you a month or 6 weeks to read all of the stuff in the comics. And they have a lot of other interviews with people involved in the production of their comic book history of the character. And, they both the Dick Grayson character as well as the Robin character.
That's just wonderful. And speaking of all that, the merchandising potential of something like Batman, Gus, you had a question.
Right. The merchandising of Batman 66 has really taken off within the past 8 or 9 years. And I was just wondering what your thoughts on all that were, the action figures, the DVDs, everything that's coming out with your face printed all over it.
Yeah, it's great. Actually, I think it started around 2010, 2011. Warner Brothers came to me and said, we're thinking of putting out a Batman 66 line of merchandise with a Batman 66 comic book line and licensing Batman 6. And we'd like to have your likeness, on our merchandise. And we'd like to, be able to have that. And they came to Adam as well. And they offered us a very nice offer. I think Adam, his agent, negotiated for a high six figures. But my wife made a suggestion to me, and she said, Burt, let's accept their offer on one condition, that they allow you to use your image as Robin on your pet products, your dog food bag, your cat food bags, without any royalty. And I said, oh, they'd never let that. Kitty, Warner Brothers, there's no way. And guess what? They did. And they were thrilled that I didn't hold them up for a lot of money, although what they offered me was very generous. And we've just had a great relationship with them. In fact, the lawyers for DC, both DC Comics and the lawyers for Warner Brothers Consumer Products, became personal friends of mine, and they came to my star ceremony, and they're just great people. And I just had a wonderful relationship with the people over there at Warner Brothers.
That's so great. Brandon, you have our next question.
Yeah, I'm also a fan of the Batman feature film that you and Adam starred in, and you go from season 1 pretty much straight into filming that. What were the major differences between filming the TV show and the feature film, or was it pretty seamless?
We had a longer filming schedule, so it allowed you to focus, on getting things better, because you have more time to do it right. And a bigger production, certainly. And there were the 4 villains instead of just one villain. So it was a lot of fun. It was something funny happened, just to show you how strange things in life can be. We filmed the movie, and then a young producer at 20th Century Fox came to me while I was back on filming Batman, and said that he was doing a very small movie at 20th Century Fox and wanted to know if I would like to star in it, on the next hiatus, the next break. And I said, sure, why not? I'd love to do that. And he was such a nice man. His name was Larry Terman. And it was all set for me to do it. 20th Century Fox approved it. However, that was the time when ABC, which was at the time a syndicated network. They weren't a full network like CBS and NBC. And it was, I must tell you, because of Batman and Bewitched, that ABC became the third network. But ABC was so concerned with not diluting my image, they didn't want me to play anything else, that they prevailed upon 20th Century Fox. Said, Burt, I know it's a small film, but look, they don't want us, we can't let you do it. I said, okay, and by the way, the name of the film was The Graduate, you might have heard of. So when they couldn't get me, they got Dustin Hoffman. But just think about the success of that film. So, I look at it like, Batman was a monster success, number 1, number 2 in the entire world. I would have loved to have done The Graduate. I think I would have done a great job in it. Dustin did a great job in it. But, it's like you win some, you lose some. And you just try to make the best of everything, of every day.
Yeah. One thing that keeps coming up in my research, getting ready to talk to you, were all these stories about you being injured on set. And in fact, you write about some of these in My Life in Tights, the book that you wrote in 1997. And I know that you've done some interviews before about what the stuntman situation on set was, but I'm wondering if you could share some insights with our audience about how that all worked out, and any stories you'd want to share about those mishaps, I guess, on set.
Well, I think that there are better protocols now in place on filming television shows and movies than there were then, because the first 4 days in a row of the first 6 days of filming, I went to the emergency hospital every day with second-degree burns, broken nose, finger out of joint. It was dangerous. And it's kind of funny because the doctor at the emergency hospital, it just happened to be, I guess he was on duty that week. He said, maybe you ought to think of going into a different line of business. You seem to be very accident prone. I said, I am not accident prone. I'd never been to an emergency hospital in my entire life. They're doing some really dangerous things, But and then, of course, I heard that they took out a giant life insurance policy on me for millions and millions of dollars. And I must tell you, by near the end of the third season, I thought they were trying to collect on that policy.
Oh,
But it was fun, and yet there was danger. I mean, there was one time with an explosion. They told me, "Oh, Burt, you don't have to worry. These special effects, it's going to shoot straight down. You know, this is one of these. They have these flash bomb kind of things where it makes a giant noise, and but it's not like full dynamite, which they used full dynamite, and that's when I went on day 3 with a broken nose to the hospital using full dynamite. But in any event, if I hadn't closed my eyes, because something told me to close my eyes, even though they said, "Oh no, the explosion's going to go down," I had second-degree burns on my eyelids. Think about that. If you have second-degree burns on your eyelids and your eyes were open, I would be blind today.
And as I mentioned earlier, kind of reliving the series with my son, and then also listening to that commentary track that Kevin and Ralph are doing. I just watched an episode. It was an episode with Mr. Freeze in the second season, and you very clearly have a bandage on your arm as well, because of some burns that you must have sustained during the filming of that show. So it's just incredible to hear all that. And like you said, hopefully there's many more protocols in place now, but we are very glad that you didn't ever get that seriously injured, and so you were able to continue on with the show. But Gus, you had our next question.
Right. You mentioned just a little while ago about the misadventures of Adam and Burt, the return to the Batcave. I was wondering how accurate of a representation of the series was that television movie. It was great, by the way, and I loved your performance in it. But how accurate was it of the time in the 60s?
It was accurate. It was based on my book and Adam's book. Adam's book, of course, was, all of the adulation that he, envisioned. My book was more meat and potatoes, what really happened. But they combined them, and they made the show, and they kept it, suitable for all ages. And it came out fine, but yeah, it was based on our books, and both of our books were real.
And they're both great.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a copy of yours right here. So
oh yeah. Now that is truly a book you can judge by its cover.
I love that. You're such a consistent and such a fan favorite at these conventions that you attend, or these panels that you do, whether it's by yourself or with the other stars of the TV show. Can you speak to the experience of meeting fans in that way? And also, how has that changed in the last year or so with COVID? I know that GalaxyCon has done some different conventions. There's other virtual conventions, but can you speak to just your convention experience and getting to meet fans?
Well, I've done more than 7,000 personal appearances in my career and signed more than 8.5 million autographs. For 50 years, I was on the road following Batman. Of those 50 years, 25 years, I did 300 cities a year. Oh. I was on the road 11 months of the year, most times, a city a day, or 2 or 3 cities in one day, one in the morning. People from 30 miles away pick me up, go to the afternoon, and people from another 20 miles pick me up to that. And then on to the next day. I worked 7 days a week, and for at least 11 months, maybe 11 and a half months a year. So I was doing, and you do that for 25 years. Believe me, you have had your fill. I'm still, the COVID, of course, has stopped everything. And I'm still intending to make appearances, but not in person. I'm going to do it virtually. And there's something actually that can come out better virtually than in person. And you might say, well, how could that be? Well, in person, of course, I could shake their hand and I could sign their autograph, but virtually, not only can I sign, they can talk to me and I can sign their autograph, which on their end comes out on a machine that precisely makes my signature with the name that I write as I dictate it on a Sharpie ink, on a glossy photo. I mean, it's just exactly as though I were there, but the added benefit that they never had before, because before I meet people, say hello, they get a photo and they leave. Now they can leave not just with a photo, but a video of us meeting. So now they have something that they can show their family, they can show their friends, they can put up on their Facebook or their webpage or whatever. So it's really, it's even more. Although I would like to do it in person, but now I can go to places that I wouldn't go before. I can go to South America that I didn't go before. I can go to London. I can go to Australia that otherwise I wouldn't be making that trip.
This is a very difficult question likely to answer because, as you mentioned, you have met millions of fans. But is there one particular interaction that kind of sticks out to you as just something that was really special in your mind?
Not when you meet 8.5 million people. I mean, it's and so many fun things. I mean, it was fun. Everybody, when they actually come up to meet you, people say, don't you get tired of just saying hello and this? I said, yeah, but when the people actually come up, these people that are in their own lives and everything, all of a sudden, when they actually get there in front of you, most of the time they become childlike. Mm-hmm. So the mom and the dad and the two kids, and the dad is saying, oh, Johnny, this was Daddy's favorite superhero. He says, Dad, you never talk like that. And Mommy said, oh, I was in love with Robin. Mom, what are you talking like that for? So that actually becomes entertaining to me, right? You see, because that's real.
Yeah.
That's so great. Brandon.
Yes, you were at the opening of the Batman exhibit at the Hollywood Museum in 2018. What was that experience like?
It was great because the owner, Donnell Dadigan, has done the most beautiful job. I've never seen a display as encompassing. I mean, the Batmobile is on display, mm-hmm. The Bat Cycle, our costumes, original villains costumes. I mean, and then not just the original costumes, but then ones that today that showed exactly what they looked like when they were at that time. I mean, it's great to see the scripts. There's so much stuff, the details that, I mean, it is meticulous. It would take you 3 days just to view all of the stuff on Batman there.
That's just wonderful. Wonderful. And Gus, you had a question for him as well.
Sure. Well, first off, congratulations on your star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And I was hoping you could take us through that experience. That must have been really satisfying.
It was a lot of fun. It's a great honor. Not every performer gets that. They actually look for people that make a contribution to society over and above their performances. And my wife and I do a lot of charity work. We operate the world's largest giant-free dog rescue. And we've rescued dogs, and 15,500 in the last 25 years, probably 350 cats. And I've done a lot of charitable stuff, and they just said, and you have to be submitted for it. And I think I was submitted for a couple of years before I actually got it. And I tell people, I've been wanting to have that for 50 years. And I'm a patient person. Okay, I'm patient. But 50 years is kind of a long time to wait, don't you think?
But certainly well deserved.
Yes.
And while you're mentioning Gentle Giants, could you tell us a little bit about the formation of your company that's been so successful?
Yes, I'm really very proud of it. My wife and I moved from the beach in Los Angeles about 26 years ago. We had a beautiful home overlooking the water, 4 stories tall. And we had this young daughter, and my 1, 2, and 3-year-old daughter would come out on these balconies that are 40 feet in the air, and like, oh, we can't take a chance. We just can't do that. No matter what you think, you can't take a chance. So we moved here an hour east of Los Angeles to the last Western town in America. Okay, this is a town called Norco, Norco, where horses have the right of way over cars, and where by law, every home has to have a horse trail either in front of it or behind it. And by law, every commercial building has to have a Western theme. You don't have regular buildings here. You have buildings that look like out of the Old West, or if it was more modern, it still had to have a Western theme. Every business has to have a horse tie-up. When you drive down the street of this community where we live, it's not dotted white lines, it's dotted red, white, and blue lines. I mean, this is Americana, okay? And we decided to get a dog for our daughter. On Batman, I had some security issues. So I had actually had trained Dobermans that I had, so I was an expert handler already there. My wife was an excellent handler too, but we started rescuing Great Danes because we'd heard that they were being put to death in shelters. And we got two, and then all of a sudden we heard that the person who had been rescuing dogs, and by the way, there are rescues for just about every breed of dog. I mean, if you had a Chihuahua, you had to give up. There's a Chihuahua rescue. If you had a German Shepherd, there's German Shepherd rescues, multiple German Shepherd rescues. But in the case of Great Danes, the one woman who in Southern California was rescuing them had died herself. And now all these big, giant, gentle giants were dying in shelters, and totally gentle. The bigger the dog is, the more gentle they are. So it was the first week of August 1994. I said to my wife, Tracy, I said, look, we can't let these dogs die. How about just for a couple of weeks, just till I find somebody else, let's just rescue these dogs. She said, okay. By the end of August 1994, we had 102 Great Danes in our home. Every one of the 15,500 that we've had in 26 years has lived in our home. We're not talking outside another building or a yard, whatever. We're talking about our home and every part of our home living communally with us. So when we started rescuing the dogs and we started to find some homes for them, and by the way, I keep saying, she reminds me, Burt, you told me it was only 2 weeks. It's been 26 years. Still haven't found anybody to come rescue us. Anyway, so these dogs traditionally don't live very long, 7 to 9 years. In the case of Mastiffs and Irish Wolfhounds, only 6 to 8 years. And here you have this wonderful, loving dog. They're dying so young. And my wife and I, when we would lose one, I mean, we just sobbed. So we vowed, it was within a year and a half we started racing, we vowed if there was a way, we would find a way, if we could, to help them live longer and healthier. And we developed a way of feeding dogs. We feed dogs differently than everybody else. That people are stunned when they hear about our feeding and care program. But that program has produced amazing results, with the average dog living 3 to 5 years longer and healthier just by the way you care for them and the way you feed them. And then, because again, these are our dogs living in our home, so it became very personal to us, excuse me, that we said, well, the only other thing we could do to help them live longer would be to make our own food. And we never thought about selling food. We couldn't stand to see our dogs die. I mean, just imagine living in your home 26 years, 24/7, with never less than 50 in your home, right? And now we actually have 45 different breeds. So we developed a food, and we thought that, again, just for our dogs. But what happened is we found out something that changed our lives forever. And I want to share this with you. We found out that dog food companies, or pet food companies in general, they know something the average person doesn't know, which is the more fat content you put in the food, the hungrier it makes the animal. It actually confuses them to believe they're always hungry. And of course, that works great if you want to sell a lot of dog food. You can increase the sales by a third just by feeding them food filled with fat. But we wanted dogs to live longer. So we made a food that when we combined our food and our feeding program, our dogs are living up to 27 years, running around like puppies in their 20s. And people say, I don't understand. I've got an 8-year-old dog. He's having a problem getting up. He's having a problem walking. And I look at your videos. I see dogs in their 20s running around like puppies. What is this food? And what is this feeding and care program? And so we developed a special food. It's called Gentle Giants. We take no salary from this. This is all about loving animals, trying to make it affordable so that everybody could afford it. And we make what we believe, and we measure our belief by the success of how long our dogs are living. I don't know anybody in the world that has dogs living as long or as healthy as ours. Our Gentle Giants, and we're in Walmart and Target and online everywhere, all across the country. But the key thing is we found a way to help them live so much longer. And it's so funny because the only complaint I ever get is once in a while I get a complaint from somebody who says, you and your wife are so nuts about dogs and cats. Why don't you do something for people? And I say, wait a minute. If I help you keep your dog an extra 5 or 10 years longer. You don't think I've done something for you?
Right.
Oh, well, I guess when you put it that way, yeah. Well, but so just imagine that here we have a home and we always have a minimum 50 in our house. There's 50 here now. You don't hear any barking. Why? Because they're all trained not to bark unless they sense danger. Why do we not allow barking? Barking is the beginning of aggressive behavior. Our dogs stand shoulder to shoulder when they eat. You can see it on our website. No arguments, no fighting, no growling. Everybody lives communally together. And we now are teaching this. We're teaching this all across the country. And people are writing to me. I got an email from a man who says, you don't know me, Mr. Ward. My German Shepherd's been on your food for 15 years. We've had it since 2005. And he just died, my German Shepherd. He was 23 years old. Now, for anybody that ever had a German Shepherd, that's double or almost triple. Most of them live 7, 8 years. Right. Once in a while, you hear one 10 or 11. You don't hear German Shepherds 23 years old. And that's other people, they write things to us like, and it's from their heart where they write like, my dog is older. My little dog, for the last 3 years, he hasn't been able to jump on the bed, which he's done his whole life to sleep with me at night. And after feeding your food for 5 weeks, he's jumping up on the bed again. Thank you for giving me my puppy back. And people say, what is it? What are you doing that is so different? And I'd like to share that with you because I don't know if any of you have pets, but we have our cat food, we have our dog food. And honestly, you shouldn't ever feed anything but our food. And I'll tell you why. Number one, our food is not full of fat. And you say, well, full of fat, what are you talking about? Go home if you have your dog and or your cat and feel the food. Rub the food in your fingers and then put the kibbles down and rub your fingers together and see if you don't feel that slightly greasy feeling. Or after they eat, just rub your finger on the inside of that bowl. Or stick your hand down below the level of the food inside the bag and feel the inside of the bag where they have the wax, covering to keep the grease from coming out through the bag. We don't do that. And people say, well, but how can that make such a big deal? Well, I say to people, would you take a can of bacon grease and pour it down your garbage disposal at home? Well, of course not. Why wouldn't you do it? Well, it would clog it. It would ruin it. I mean, once it hardened, I'd have to buy a new garbage disposal. I said, that's right. So when you realize that animal fat will ruin a metal garbage disposal, why would you ever feed a dog or a cat a food that every single kibble, every single meal, every single day is encapsulated in animal fat? Oh, gee, I never thought of it that way. That's one thing. The other thing is, you guys, I'm sure, are all familiar with GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Well, probably in the last 10 years, 15 years, maybe, with people growing crops. For example, rice, where they go to grow the rice and it's attacked by pests, they spray a pesticide on it, kills the plant. But by genetic engineering, the plant now doesn't die and the rice is produced and sold. But guess what? The plant absorbed the pesticide. And dogs and cats, as an example, are not designed as well as humans. That's why they don't live as long. They're much more frail and they're much more susceptible to getting cancer from the pesticides in GMOs. Genetically modified rice makes up 98% of the rice sold in the United States. It's only 2% that's non-GMO. We buy that non-GMO rice as well as all of the other products. So it costs us twice as much to make our food, but when we don't take any salary from it and we pass it on basically for what it costs us, people are still getting a bag much less expensive than if they went to a pet store. In fact, our motto is half the price and twice the life. So that's our story. And our dogs, Great Danes, the only ones that haven't lived to 27, up to 27, they're living, the oldest Great Dane we've had is 22, but that's still phenomenal. And we thought because we'd only rescued 350 cats in 26 years, not 15,000 dogs, that we probably wouldn't have made a cat food, except last year, 2 of our cats died. One was 31 years old and the other was 32 years old. Guess what they were eating? Our dog food. So now we understand and we already know that cats need a little extra protein and stuff. So we always had regular cat food there with them. But they ate 75, 80% of what they ate was our dog food. So we then went back and to our top nutritionists, the 4 top guys we could find in the US, and had them design a cat food. And we now have our Gentle Giant's cat and kitten food, which again sold in Targets and Walmart.com and all these online companies. So anyway, now we have cats living longer. And even beyond that, although I doubt we're going to make horse food, our horses, and we have horses here, every one of my horses has lived 35 to 40 years, not the traditional 25 to 30 years. We feed our horses differently than people feed. So, and if you're a rescuer, and we've rescued horses, we've rescued pigs and goats and sheep and all of this stuff, you save lives. Saving life is the most precious commodity in the world. So that is what we do. And people say, well, I don't understand you. I mean, here you are, an actor, and what are you doing being a dog rescuer and a cat rescuer? And I say, well, think of it this way. On Batman, I was the Cape Crusader. Then I became the Canine Crusader. And now I'm the Cat and Kitten Crusader.
That's just perfect. And thank you for your passion. You can tell how much this means to you just in the way that you communicate about it. And that person that told you that you're not helping humans in this way, they were fully wrong in that, because you are truly, there's nothing like the feeling that you get from your pet and your animal, and to have that longevity is just wonderful. So thank you so much today for your time. We've had an opportunity to speak to a good number of people during this last year, and we're grateful to that, and very interesting people like yourself. And I always like to ask this final question, and that is that you have done countless interviews out there, but is there ever something that you're not asked about, or a story that you're always wanting to share that you're not able to? This is sort of just a last free moment for you to speak to anything that you would like to, that you don't traditionally get asked about too often.
Well, as you know, I'm not exactly shy and retiring. So I usually talk about whatever is on my mind, and I answer all their questions. I will say something about the future. My wife and I have just formed another company called Superheroes to the Rescue. And the concept of that is that to encourage everybody in their own way, to the limited extent that they can do, to do something kind for animals or for another person. And all of us can be a superhero and make a contribution, however small. So we've done that. We've also now created an event that we put on every year. Last year was Burt Ward's first annual Batusi Dance for Peace. And what we did is we contacted people all over the world. Okay, and television stations. We have all this video we're putting together now of my first annual Batusi for world peace. And the concept was, in a world that is so divided, from such stress and such hatred, what if we could all just take a break for like 3 to 5 minutes and do something crazy and fun, like dance the Batusi, and just have a little fun, and maybe look upon your neighbor in a little friendlier light, because we're all trying to get through life the best we can. And we've got responses. We have Israeli soldiers at the Wailing Wall dancing the Batusi. We have Channel 10 in Australia, one of the number one channels in Australia. All their hosts are up there dancing the Batusi, and people in costumes, and dogs dancing in Batman costumes and Robin costumes. I mean, we're putting this together, and it's so gigantic. I mean, we literally are compositing probably 40 or 50 videos into one video, and you're seeing it like, it's an eyeful. It's kind of like our dog food bag. There's just so much to see. But and this is, again, why are we doing it? Because we want to leave this planet in a better place than we found it. And in today's world, that's going to be a real challenge, because back in the 60s, for those of you growing up there, it was a different time. It was a period of a simpler life. There was love and flower children, and it was just a different world. It's become so acrimonious today, and we'd like to try to turn that around if we can, or at least make a dent in it.
That's just so wonderful. Thank you for your time today, Burt. It's just been a pleasure getting to speak to you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Citizen. And as we said on Batman, to the Batmobile.
What a fantastic opportunity to get to speak to Burt today. And it was so great to hear not only his passion for the character that still exudes 50 years later, but also his passion for animals and the rescue that him and his wife have done. 15,000 gentle giants over the years. It's just absolutely incredible. Amazing. Gus, I want to go to you first for your response and your reaction to the interview, because I know, again, as we mentioned at the top, this show and this character has meant a lot to you.
It really has. Both Adam West and Burt Ward have always been heroes of mine, because I started my infatuation with Batman at an early age. And one of the things that really struck me, we've talked about his energy and his enthusiasm. If you listen to the recent animated movies that he and Adam West voiced just a couple of years ago, he still sounds the same. There's that youthful energy that's still there in his voice characterization. Other people age a little bit, but he doesn't. And that energy that got him the job in the first place sticks with him today. And charming guy, very friendly, didn't take any of these questions as, oh my gosh, I've heard this for 5 million times. Every answer was fresh and enthusiastic. And I thought he was very interesting and very personable.
Absolutely. And having gone back to the series so recently to watch this through, it's just fun to see. Yes, there is definitely a script to these shows, and they do follow the same format, but they are just so much fun to be able to introduce my son to superheroes. So if you haven't gone back and watched Batman 66, regardless if you're a parent or if you're just someone like me that really loved watching those on rerun or syndication, or someone like Gus who was experiencing it basically their whole life, definitely I recommend to go back and check that out and to be able to watch these, because they're just so watchable even 50 years later. Brandon, do you have any thoughts on your on this interview?
Yeah, it's always disheartening sometimes when you hear someone from a classic series or movie and you just hear that they had a miserable time filming it and everybody hated each other. It's nice knowing that the fun that was on screen was also happening off screen with everybody. And it's just nice to know that he's always glad to go back and reminisce. And it sounds fresh every time. I'm sure he's answered some of our questions, as Gus said, millions of times, but he says it with the same kind of enthusiasm he would if you were asking him for the first time. So to see that he's been able to take his fame and use it for good as well, he's really a great example, I think.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, I do want to mention that if you are a fan of Burt and you're checking us out for the first time, you can find all the Front Row Network podcasts by just searching for the Front Row Network on any podcast feed of your choice. Also, we are part of NPR Illinois, and so you can find us on nprillinois.org as well. But particularly, Brandon is the host of Classics, and that is really our podcast all about classic films. You and Eric seem to have encyclopedic knowledge of these films as they go along. So what do you have coming up on Classics that people might want to hear about?
Oh, we've got some fun stuff coming up this summer. We just sat down with Larry Smith to talk about the original Pink Panther from 1963. That was a fun discussion. You can also go back, by the time this is released, you can hear Craig join us on our show to discuss A Streetcar Named Desire.
Stella.
That was a great discussion. And then your two co-hosts are going to join us in early July, Brett and Vanessa, and we're going to talk about Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and Top Hat. So a lot of fun, different genres coming out for us this summer.
Absolutely. And since you mentioned my two other co-hosts, I should mention that I also host a show all about Disney for the network called Beyond the Mouse. We talk all things parks, we talk all things news, and anything to involve the Disney company. And so we have a lot of fun, myself, Brett, and Vanessa. So check us out as well. You can find us on the main feed of the Front Row Network. You can also find individually Front Row Classics by searching for that in any podcast app, or also Beyond the Mouse by searching for that in any podcast app of your choice. Now, Gus, before we leave, we have mentioned before that there are, during this pandemic, the arts and creative community have taken a bit of a hit. And so I do know that in your day job, you are the executive director of the Hoagland Center for the Arts. And we absolutely love that as a community icon here in Central Illinois, and particularly in Springfield. You always have said it's the heart of the arts in Central Illinois and in Springfield. So I wanted to give you the opportunity. Do you have a way for people to potentially get involved in donating to the Hoagland Center for the Arts if they would like to?
Oh, sure. And Craig, thank you for mentioning that. They can always go to our website. We're getting a new freshly designed website. And Vanessa works with me too. And Vanessa's our assistant director. And she's kind of spearheading the new website. But you can go to that hcfta.org, Hoagland Center for the Arts.org. We have a donate function there. And I'm very pleased to say that we'll soon be reopening. So things are definitely finally looking up. And we'll be inviting crowds back into the building late this summer, into the fall months. And we hope that people will come out and volunteer to help usher, or to be in shows, or to watch shows, or to be a part of the arts. Once again, it's been a long time. It's been a long 15 months. And I think people are ready to get back out and enjoy singing and dancing and art and beauty and fun. So we welcome you to come to the Hoagland.
It's wonderful. I am so ready. That place has been my home away from home, and to not have been in that building in over a year, it's just going to feel so great when we're all back there together and celebrating the arts. So, and speaking of celebration, this was just such a wonderful interview. We want to say thank you again to Burt for his time and for his passion and for what he does to leave that positive energy that we need, not only in his animal rescue, but he just talked about a bunch of people dancing, and that type of positive energy is certainly something that we need as we go. There we go, Gus. Perfect. So wonderful time to get to talk to him today, and it's just been such a pleasure. So for the Front Row Network, I am Craig.
I'm Brandon.
And I'm Gus.
And we will see you real soon in the front row. Maybe in the front row of the Batcave. What do you think? Maybe the Batmobile. That actually might be even better. That'd be even
Zowie.
Yeah.